मैं राघवेंद्र सिंह फिर एक बार आपके साथ नो हाफ ट्रुथ्स पूरा सच इनसाइड आउट का एक और एपिसोड लेकर आज हमारे साथ ज्वाइन कर रहे हैं तिलक दिवाकर, वन ऑफ द prominent security experts of India. Mr. Tilak Devashar has a lot of books also on Pakistan to his credit. And the latest one particularly is on Baluchistan. So welcome Tilak today on our show No Half Truths, Inside Out, Pura Sach. The first question, which is a very generic question, which I want to ask you, is how does one perceive the Pakistan military, the Pakistan state, and the Pakistan political leadership?
So, first of all, thank you very much for having me on your show. It's a very tough questions that you've posed. Let me go back to pre-1947. I think all these, the military, the politics, the polity, it all stems from the fact that the Pakistan movement, or the movement that led to the creation of Pakistan, was not an organic movement. It was supported, facilitated, and encouraged by the British. Right from 1906, when that Simla Memorandum, when they went, and then the setting up of the All India Muslim League in Dhaka. Yeah. Because the British found that though they had set up the Indian National Congress and they had wanted the Congress to be a debating society, they found that the questions that the Congress was raising were questions that they would rather not be raised or be answered. And then they also found that increasingly Muslims were joining the Congress. In fact, in my book, I mentioned the details of how many Congress delegates were there in various sessions after the creation of the Congress. So, and then the movement in Bengal was gathering steam. So they said, something has to be done to make sure that you divide the movement right at the inception. And there was since after the 1857, the British have realized one thing, that if the Hindus and Muslims get together, they will show them the door. Therefore, they had to keep them divided. In fact, there's a lovely quotation of Lord Canning, I think. Again, I mentioned in my book. So, for these reasons, the British at every stage push the Muslim League, once it was created, to stand in opposition to the Congress. And they were looking for leaders, and ultimately they zeroed in on Muhammad Ali Jinnah. So they made sure that the Muslim League became the representative body of all Muslims, and Jinnah became the sole spokesman. Once again, there were other leaders also in the Muslim community, but they stuck with Jinnah. In fact, there was a very interesting occasion where in the Simla conference, Khan Sahib, who was the chief minister of NWFP,
46.
Yeah. He told Lord Wavell that I am the chief minister of the largest province of where Muslims, 95% of the population is Muslim. And how do you say that Muslim League or Jinnah represent the Muslim? The fact that the British midwifed or helped the Muslim League all along, the Muslim League, they came into the habit of receiving everything on a platter. See, unlike the Congress that struggled for India's independence, all the top leaders went to jail.
I don't think even Muslim League perhaps fought for India's independence. They fought for
Nobody in the Muslim League ever went to jail for demanding Pakistan.
Yes.
So that tradition, legacy, carried on into when Pakistan was created. The political party structure, if you look at all the political parties even today, they do not have a party organization. They are notables in districts who get elected, then they get together कि इस साल किस party को support करें या after this election which party. So having got everything on a platter, political system in Pakistan was very, very weak. And bulk of the leadership came from India, whether it was Jinnah, whether it was Liaquat Ali. Whereas the army leadership was sons of the soil. You know, Ayub Khan, Muhammad Musa, Yahya Khan. Zia was the first person who had by which time the army had already established itself. Therefore, right from the inception, the Pakistan army continued to play a dominating role. Started playing a dominating role, even though there were civilian politicians. But till 58, they were civilian politicians, but they didn't have their roots in what became Pakistan, whereas the army did. So it was very easy for the army to step into a position of power, raise the bogey of the Indian threat, and they haven't looked back since then. And we are in 2025 today. The army still calls the shot. And that's the weakness of the Pakistan political system.
So while one is born and brought up in India and has an Indian ethos, which is also born out of the political experience, which everyone has had, having seen things through from Mr. Nehru's time onto Lal Bahadur Shastri, etc. We are in a way used to perceiving things in our own way. Now, if we compare our ethos to the Pakistani ethos, right, would you say how if India, or rather if 10 Indians, ordinary Indians, were placed in Islamabad or Rawalpindi or Karachi, how different would they find things?
We totally fish out of water. Because, you know, we are used to, we accepted unity and diversity. We accepted secularism. Right? In the case of Pakistan, their nationalism was based on anti-India, anti-Hindu. Right? They are not a secular people. It's the Islamic Republic. In the preamble to the constitution, where the objective resolutions are, there is out and out Islamic country. Then the curriculum of what is taught in Pakistani schools. See, that makes a very big difference to how the generations grow up. Now, I have seen myself, the Qaeda, when children A for apple and B for ball. So there you have Zer se Zalim. And there's a photograph of a Sardar. So in the mind of a 5-year-old child, and which stays through his life, all Sardars are synonyms. Dar se Daku. And you have a fat Hindu with a thorn and a bodhi. So in his mind, Hindus are Dakus. So when the person goes to Islamabad, he'll be totally lost, provided he stays there more than 3 days. See, unfortunately, what happens is that when Indians used to go to Islamabad for a cricket match or something like that, they'd be overwhelmed. With a hospitality. Yes. Or passionate, in Punjabi, paise nahi lete. It was so good. Why are we fighting? Why are we there? If they stayed longer, then you really realize,
Right.
because the pretenses are drawn. Then, you come to see them for what they are.
Yes. So now, whatever is transpiring right now, and with the kind of state that Pakistan is, we all hope that it's a short-term thing and things will die down and we will achieve a state of normalcy soon. But even in short term, do you think that the political leadership really doesn't count for much? So the military leadership, what I mean is the military leadership, will that emerge out of whatever is happening more strengthened, more powerful?
It's an interesting question. First of all, I think the basic ethos of Pakistan with the political or military is not going to change. Because in the DNA of Pakistan, the hatred for the Hindu and hatred for India is steeped. You can't change that. It is not in the near or medium term. Today, for a change, for a very interesting development has happened, that the Pakistan military has been weakened. For the last
Will you explain it a little?
Yeah. For the last 4 or 5 years, thanks to Imran Khan, one man. When he says he called Bajwa as Mir Jafar, and got away with it, he has turned the tide against the military. For 70 years, the army was used to that whatever they said or did was accepted unquestioned, especially in Punjab. But this one man came, created an image of Riyasat-e-Madina, created this image of a corruption-free society. And because of his own credentials, his personality, the way he spoke, he attracted the youth especially. And if you look at the demographics of Pakistan, 60% of the population is below the age of 35.
I didn't know this.
Yeah.
Okay.
So they have been attracted. The PMLN, Nawaz Sharif's party, and the PPP are old world politicians.
Ji.
You know, they believe in biradari. They believe in the district mein kaun important hai, laptop de diya, you know, that kind of old world politics.
Patron client kind of.
PTI, Imran Khan introduced his new world politics of social media, of connecting the youth and their aspirations. So they have made a serious dent on the aura and the charisma of the Pakistan Army in the last 4 or 5 years. And unfortunately, the Pakistan Army chiefs, especially the current one, does not inspire the confidence of leadership. So the Pakistan Army has taken a big hit in terms of domination. So even when this crisis gets resolved, and this crisis, I think, is going to hurt the Pakistan Army even more. Because that speech, or you would have heard of
Two nation theory.
Yeah, he talks about. In fact, somebody commented that he better start learning about the 4 nation theory very soon.
Yes.
Yeah, the 2 nation theory.
True.
So he tried to project himself as a very strong man. You know, macho guy, that we are different from Hindus, we are this and we are that, and followed up with Pahalgam.
But that mustn't have been a very impulsive thing. I mean, whatever, he may be wrong, but this must have been a thought out thing for him to say what he said.
See, at one level, he didn't say anything new. If you look at Jinnah's speech in March 1940, even Jinnah's speech was not original. This Sayyid Ahmed, in the 1890s,
Yes.
he had said very much the same thing, that, you know, the two can't live together. So Munir was not saying anything new, but the manner in which he said it and the occasion on which he said it showed, you know, that kind of, especially because he's a Hafiz al-Quran. Also, I believe, and I've written about this, his 3-year tenure finishes in November. So this was the first blow in his extension campaign to tell the Pakistani public, because he knows that he has to regain credibility. Followed up with Pahalgam. You see, Pahalgam was also not a one-off. Apparently now it's coming out that for 2 months prior to Pahalgam, a lot of the US satellites and private satellite operators were tasked to give satellite images of Pahalgam.
Oh.
You know, so that means sufficient planning went into it to make sure that this incident happens, you know, when it happens. I personally feel that Munir's calculation was that India will respond militarily immediately, like they did after Balakot and after Uri. Thoda bahut is jahan par hoengi, it'll de-escalate. But in the meantime, I would have rallied the country behind me, and the army would have, you know, regained its charisma. I think India went a step ahead by responding first with non-kinetic, and especially holding in abeyance the Indo-Wasat Treaty. Now that is impacting the farmers today, because water is something which is a huge crisis in Pakistan. If you hold the Indus and the tributaries in abeyance and play around with how much water you release. So IRSA, which is the Indus River Water System Authority in Pakistan, they came out with a statement 3-4 days ago that there is a 20%, 21% shortage of water at the moment, at a time when Kharif crop is to be sown. You know, early Kharif is from May. There's a 21% shortage in the early Kharif. So if you don't sow at the right time,
हाँ वो तो बात सही है.
you know, so that will impact.
तो कटाई तो हो गई
हाँ,
बहुत पहले.
रबी तो कट गया.
हाँ.
But अब Kharif is just sowing का है, and you don't have water for sowing. So that is as for the rivers. The 2 dams that they have, Tarbela and Mangla, have also reached dead levels.
Okay.
You know, because of silting, capacity that they had when they were constructed is at 50%.
Okay.
So they need water, incoming water from the Jhelum, from the chenab.
जो बहुत कम होगा.
And that helps in the sowing season. But that's not happening. Because India is withholding, let's say, for 3 days, and then you release a large amount of water, which ultimately will find its way to the sea. Because they don't have enough storage capacity.
Okay.
They only have storage capacity for 10 days.
Okay.
Whereas the international average is for 40 days.
Okay.
They haven't built storage dams. So this is a huge impact which they did not anticipate that India would do this. So people and farmers, and now they have all kinds of memes कि पीने के लिए पानी नहीं है.
वो तो देखना.
All these kind of
में आ रहा है. Yes.
So Munir is getting a bashing because of that.
Okay. Okay.
And then you had this attack on the camps. We'll come to that, but I've strayed a lot from the original. But it's always interesting to hear you, even if you stray. But so coming back to the original question, so this time the army's credibility is at a very low ebb. Unlike for the last 70 years. And I think as and when we come out of this crisis, the army will find it extremely difficult to reassert their position unless there is a military coup.
Okay.
Unless he dismisses the government and takes over himself. That also the other people in the army, the corps commanders and the veterans, and may not be very supportive of as in the past.
What do you think has been the genesis of the problem between India and Pakistan, with Jammu and Kashmir in particular? Because they say it's a very straightforward thing. The thing is, we want the whole of Kashmir, except for some districts which perhaps are Hindu dominated. You take them, give me the valley, give me the rest, etc. Obviously, India will not do that. So it's a straightforward issue, but it's not a simple issue. In your view, what can be a solution to this issue which has festered for more than 75 years?
You see, I'll put it very simply. Pakistan's nationalism is religious. They feel that wherever there is a Muslim concentration, that should come to Pakistan. Indian nationalism is territorial. We believe that what we have, what we got in 1947, irrespective of the population or the demographics, is Indian. Now, between these two concepts of nationalism, there is no meeting ground. That is the basic fundamental of Jammu and Kashmir. There is no meeting ground. What can be the solution?
So, if I put it another way, there was partition. When the partition took place, what did it mean? It meant that coexistence together is not possible. Right? Now, you see, if coexistence is made to be possible, it will invalidate everything. It will invalidate the partition. It will invalidate two-nation theory, etc. So, is it a given for times to come, till God knows when, that Pakistan will carry on because its raison d'etre for existence is animosity, and so no matter how much we try to resolve the issue will not resolve.
Absolutely. And this is something that people in India need to understand. Unless and until Pakistan changes its DNA, it has to go back to the drawing board of 1940.
But sir, DNA can't be changed.
So that's the whole problem. You see, it has to go back to the drawing board, admit. You see, the big sort of proof of this is Maulana Azad. His differences with Jinnah were what? He's told Jinnah, look, nowhere in the Quran or in Islam does it say that Muslims form a Qaum. Everybody living in that place, in that territory, is part and parcel of the country, of that Qaum.
Part and parcel of the Watan.
If it was what you are saying, then why are there 53 Muslim countries? Why are there so many countries on the Arabian Peninsula? Ethnically, they are the same. They're all Sunni Muslimans. Why is it? So is it you're trying to form a country on the basis, basically, he said on a lie. He said the Indian Muslims have got loyalty to their sect. Not to this amorphous thing of Islam, which you say that on the basis of Islam will create a country.
So obviously,
they have to go back to the drawing board. Now, who will in Pakistan
have that kind of?
Because, one of the biggest problems I've identified is the lack of leadership in Pakistan. There is nobody in Pakistan today who has an understanding of the problems of Pakistan, who has the vision to know what to do and who has the courage to do it. They're all pygmies. You know, and Punjab, which is such a dominating presence in Pakistan, the only leader that Punjab has produced in the last 800 years is Maharaja Ranjit Singh. There has not been another leader. I mean, I'm a Punjabi. Okay. There is no Punjabi leader who has come to the fore. They're all pygmies. So, in this kind of a situation, they can't go back to the drawing board because nobody has the courage to do so. And without going back to the drawing board, they will continue to suffer the consequences of trying to create a country, unify a country, which has different sects. You look at the Baloch, look at the Pashtuns, look at the Sindhis. They all have their own history, they all have their own culture, and they have been in existence much more than 1947. I mean, the Baloch and the Pashtuns claim that they were converted by the Prophet. Yes. You know, you've also written about this. So, and Pakistan is saying, no, you're all part of one big, large Islamic family. For them, their Pashtun Wali, their religion, their culture, their language comes first. East Pakistan broke away because for the Bengali, language was far more important than Islam. So by trying to create a false narrative and a false identity based on religion, Pakistan started on the wrong foot. And they are very nice after it. If I could just allow me, please do. टेढ़ मेरी नींव में थी, टेढ़ मेरी नींव में थी, दीवारों को इल्जाम क्या दूं? You know, if your foundations are crooked, how do you blame the walls? Absolutely.
Now, I would still give them a little benefit of doubt here while speaking to you. Transfer yourself to the Pakistan situation. And there, the leadership, would they be able to give up the mudda of Jammu and Kashmir ever? मैं इसलिए ये बात कह रहा हूं कि अगर किसी ने ये कर भी दिया तो ये पॉसिबल भी है पाकिस्तान में कि लोग मान जाएं.
See, for 70 years they've been fed on a diet of Kashmir बनेगा पाकिस्तान. Right? Kashmir हमारी शारग है, पाकिस्तान की शारग है. Jinnah is supposed to have said this. I haven't come across the reference anywhere. मैंने भी नहीं देखा कि where he has said this. वो हिंदी वैसे भी नहीं बोल सकते थे. मतलब उर्दू भी बोलने में उनको बड़ी परेशानी. Yeah, exactly. So I don't think so. First of all, any leader, say any leader, political leader who tries to do this, the religious parties will come down on him like a ton of bricks. So will the army. In fact, I am increasingly convinced that Kashmir is not the jugular so much of Pakistan. It's a jugular certainly of the army. Because the Kashmir issue allows the army to appropriate a large chunk of the budget, to project Pakistan as the enemy, and to project the army as the ultimate savior of not only the territorial frontiers of Pakistan, but also the ideological frontiers. So they can't give up on their Kashmir, however hard they may try, unless they are forced. See, if they are forced, military, if the Pakistan army is decimated, then there is a possibility. Similarly, on the Indian side, so long as there is a unanimous parliamentary resolution of 1994 that the entire princely state of Jammu Kashmir is part of India, no politician can even negotiate it.
Coming back to the two-nation theory, Tilak, partition, what does that signify? Partition to me signifies the triumph of the two-nation theory. ये आपको प्रोपेगेंडा देता है, ये आपको पॉलिटिकल लिवरेज देता है, ये आपको टैक्टिकल मैन्यूवरेबिलिटी देता है. अच्छा, इसके कन्फ्रंटिंग दैट जो पॉलिटिकल टूल था कांग्रेस पार्टी का उस समय, वो था कि भाई हम कम्युनल एमिटी चाहेंगे. Territorial concept is what you said. Now, extending that logic, you see, when we went to the United Nations within 2-3 months of this problem taking place of Jammu and Kashmir, then there it became very apparent कि भाई हमारी जो आर्मीज हैं उनकी और पाकिस्तान की जो सो कॉल्ड फॉर्मल आर्मी है वो भी जम्मू कश्मीर में आएगी. एक न्यूट्रल एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन आएगा, उस न्यूट्रल एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन में सब लोग रहेंगे, बट शेख अब्दुल्ला की होल एंड सोल जो वो रहेगी वो सब नहीं रहेगी. तो उसके बाद प्लेबिसिट होगा. तो इसका मतलब ये था कि प्लेबिसिट रीजन वाइज होगा। तो रीजन वाइज का क्या मतलब है कि भाई कश्मीर को भी हम उसी तरीके से पार्टीशन कर देंगे जैसे इंडिया को पार्टीशन किया। प्रश्न मेरा ये है कि उसके बाद से हमारी स्ट्रैटेजी कितनी टेरिटोरियल हुई है, इस पे आप हमें बताएंगे। मेरा आपसे ये पूछना है तिलक कि हम किस तरफ जाएं?
You know where the contradiction lies? The UN resolutions of 49, which talked about a plebiscite, had one fundamental condition, that Pakistan will withdraw all its troops or people not resident there, and India can still keep 49%. Somehow or the other, I'm not sure, and this is a good subject for research. For 70 years, we were always on the defensive. Pakistan in every forum in the UN would say, have a plebiscite, and India would make excuses and things like that. Why didn't we go in for a plebiscite? Provided the condition of Pakistan putting out all their troops and the Qabilis who came in and settled in into Gilgit were moved out. They changed the demography. But we never focused on this point. Now we are talking about it. But all the best time to hold a plebiscite was after 71, when Pakistan had butchered 3 million Bangladeshis, and the hatred for Pakistan was so much. That was the best time to end the plot.
तो वो उस समय जो उनके हिसाब से जो मकबूजा है, जो एरिया है, उसमें भी वैसे ही था.
Yes, there was a lot of hatred for Pakistan even then. Yes.
Okay.
Even before that, 65 when Operation Gibraltar was launched, what he told Ayub Khan was that when you go there, people will rise up and welcome Pakistan with open arms. Those Kashmiris handed those guys over to the police for things. But we, somehow or the other, were on the defensive. And so we didn't do this. So I think now the one alternative or the one way that this problem can be resolved is that the development and economic development, especially in J&K, is so much, and the conditions in POK and Gilgit-Baltistan deteriorate so much. As it is, there's a lot of resentment. You see, Pakistan has sold this narrative to them that you are the base camp for Kashmiri freedom. Therefore, if there's no development today, it is because you are a base camp. और बेस कैंप में डेवलपमेंट नहीं होती. तुम यहाँ से जिहाद करो और पूरा कश्मीर तुम्हारा बन जाएगा. And now people are saying, what jihad? What base camp? Hospitals नहीं है, schools नहीं है, roads नहीं है. Can you imagine if somebody has to come and go from Muzaffarabad to Gilgit? He has to come to Rawalpindi and then go. There is no, Pakistan has made sure there is no connection. This again is a colonial legacy. The 7 FATA agencies, the British made sure were not connected to each other. You had to come into the mainland, come into Bannu, come into Mardan, and then go to the next agency. The colonial strategy. Pakistan continued to do that.
After 15th of August, 1947, Jinnah had said that all the disputes should be sorted under the umbrella of the Commonwealth Group of Nations. The British said no. Without telling him, they said, we'll slow pedal it. Then he went to UNGA. The UNGA got time barred. And then he went to he wanted to go to the Security Council, and he was saying, no, you don't go. You just wait, hang on, patience. We'll take the Indians over there. Now, why am I mentioning all this? I'm mentioning all this. If this can be proved that, there was a guilt or mens rea behind all this, does this not give us a reason enough to renege from whatever we had agreed to? Because the whole process gone through was or looks like a conspiracy.
I just one step back. The Gilgit Mutiny. Gansara Singh was the
Gansara Singh
was the governor. The British expected that Maharaja of Kashmir would accede to Pakistan. The population was lesser. He signed the instrument of accession. Pakistan overplayed its hand. Qabilis entered beforehand. So Maharaja acceded to India. As soon as they heard that, you see, they were very keen that India should not have a border with the then Soviet Union.
Yes.
Because they felt Nehru was a socialist.
But then they have said that all this is red herring. We really don't believe in this, but this is all red herring.
If you read Narendra Singh Sarela's book.
Okay.
Yeah. So why did Major Brown carry out the mutiny and arrests Ghansara Singh after Hari Singh had signed the instrument of accession. He could have done it before that. But once the British realized that he has acceded to India, they wanted to make sure at least the Gilgit area is.
Yes.
So again, the British
Didn't such a prodigious writer Nehru was. He doesn't write anything about Gilgit after that. And in one of the meetings, Liaquat Ali actually tells all these people, including Ismay, that look, no one can take this. I mean, India doesn't have the wherewithal to take the Gilgit agency back from us. But we just kept completely quiet. Nehru's absence on, protesting against Gilgit is something I don't quite understand.
I think ultimately he felt that Valley was the heart of Kashmir.
And then you let Bhimber, Mirpur, you stop Batala, everything gets taken away.
Yeah.
And people
the reply of Sheikh Abdullah. Sheikh Abdullah, I think, told him. The other way, take it back. No. He was the Punjabi speaking. Muzaffarabad, Kotli, Bagh, these areas. So stop the Indian army at this particular point. We don't want that area. We have the valley, and that's more than enough.
So this actually is a reflection on our strategic thinking of that time, which is actually a very sad, but disappointing thing.
Like hindsight is...
No, there are letters, very desperate letters being written by the Kashmiri authorities, the Prime Minister, Meher Chand Mahajan, etc. कि साहब ये फिर बाद में आप ले नहीं सकते, मुझे एक बटालियन तो दे दीजिए, मैं आ रहा हूँ दिल्ली, आके धरने पे बैठूंगा अगर आप मुझे देंगे नहीं कुछ यहाँ पे फोर्सेस। नहीं मिली उन लोगों को, और वो एरियाज चले गए। आप एक तरफ तो अब्दुल्ला को सपोर्ट करते हैं बिकॉज ही इज अ मुस्लिम, दूसरी तरफ यू थ्रो बच्चा खान to the wolves. उसके बारे में आप क्या कहें? मुझे अभी याद आया तो मैंने सोचा आपसे पूछ। ये क्यों हुआ? क्योंकि वो भी
one of the most unfortunate incidents of the partition era. The amount of money the British spent in the 46 elections.
Yes.
Even though the Khudai Khidmat Ghat had boycotted it.
Yeah.
All the Pir Manki Sharif and all those fellows, hope they bribed for this. So that was a huge strategic mistake.